By the time we're done testing it, I believe it's pretty much invulnerable.
And that's pretty much what they said about the Titanic.
That's right.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the most chilling moments from OceanGate's operations before and after the Titan implosion.
It's been a long process to ensure that Titan can go to the Titanic repeatedly and safely.
20 hours.
But then he explained that like one of the batteries kind of went kaput, and we were having trouble using the electronic drops for the weights.
Not a lot of people outside the world of ocean exploration were aware of Titan before it disappeared in 2023. And those who did fell into two camps. Those rich and naive enough to trust Stockton Rush, and those who were horrified by what he was doing.
Did we change our
Hang on a second. We are starting to come up.
We are?
Yep.
One business magnate from British Columbia took 2 different trips on the sub in 2022, and in one of them, there was a malfunction that left them underwater for 20 hours.
We had a bit of issue with one of the battery banks. Stockton had mentioned we're not seeing full vertical thruster availability.
Something malfunctioned, and the sub couldn't drop the ballasts it uses to make itself buoyant enough to rise to the surface. So they were all stuck down there, waiting until the failsafe, ropes that dissolve over time, kicked in. The warnings.
A carbon fiber sub that's essentially a home build with no independent oversight is not up for the task.
Engineers and experts were calling and writing to Stockton Rush for years before the catastrophic implosion, warning him over and over again about one thing: carbon fiber. The carbon fiber hull was the root of all OceanGate's problems, and the reason the sub failed like it did.
Stockton threatened me with legal action if I went any further with my course of action.
The problem is that carbon fiber is a composite that weakens over time as it's exposed to repeated strain, meaning that on every single dive, it gets weaker and weaker. More dives doesn't prove that the carbon fiber is safe, it just brings it closer each time to the point at which it isn't, with experts saying that when that happened, there would be a catastrophic failure. And that's exactly what took place on June 18th.
And then would you describe Titan, based on the information that you know, as an experimental manned submersible?
Yeah.
Dive 80.
Do you have any questions about what's going on, about acoustic monitoring, about carbon fiber problems we had, rumors of problems we had, actual problems we had?
Titan had a real-time monitoring system that would be able to detect the sound of a potential failure before it happened. And actually, the real-time monitoring system does seem to have worked. Kind of. On Titan's 80th dive on July 15th, 2022, nearly a year before the implosion, the RMT detected a, quote, loud acoustic event, which was the carbon fiber hull failing.
Mission 4, when we got to the surface, Scott was piloting. He heard a really loud bang, not a soothing sound, but on the surface.
If Rush and the other engineers at OceanGate had heeded this and realized that the sub was a ticking time bomb from this point on, the implosion wouldn't have happened.
The first time the carbon fiber made a noise in that hull, it was extremely loud. It was like a gunshot.
Although it's highly likely that Rush would have built another identical sub, as he'd already done before and kept going. Earplugs.
You don't want to be in a submarine and hear those kinds of sounds.
There have been many documentaries released after the implosion, and a handful made before, following Rush's dives to the Titanic. But one of the most disturbing things Rush said about the safety of Titan was his personal solution to the cracking sounds.
Those click sounds, that wasn't a mouse clicking. And you could feel it. I was in the dome. I could feel these things popping.
The cracking sounds were the carbon fiber buckling and tearing under the pressure of the ocean. And he solved this by wearing earplugs so that it didn't bother him anymore.
The second dive, I put earplugs in.
Right.
And it worked much better.
You just ignored it, right?
Yeah.
This was after journalists and other experts pointed out that the cracking was a danger sign and that it meant the integrity of the hull was being slowly eroded. Yet again, ego got in the way of safety.
It's like you're paying somebody to play Russian roulette, and there's really 3 bullets in the chamber, but you're told there's only 1. That's not right.
The waiver.
This is an experimental sub. People are informed that it's very dangerous down there.
What could be scarier than being asked to sign a waiver that acknowledges you have a very real risk of dying 4,000 meters under the sea? A legal case from the family of one of the victims, Paul-Henri Nargelet. is ongoing. It looks like OceanGate thought that this waiver would absolve them of ever being sued should something go wrong.
The team always says, you know, there's no guarantee you're going to see the bow, there's no guarantee you're going to get down there, because there's so many variables.
We don't know how this case will go, and whether anybody other than Rush, who also perished in the sub, is liable for what happened. But there's no small number of people out there who refused to dive on Titan. Suleiman Dawood, one of the victims, nearly backed out until being persuaded to dive by his father.
And I think that if it wasn't an accident, it then has to be some degree of crime.
The sound of the implosion.
Titan confirms they're on the bow of the Titanic.
On July 18th, the sub lost contact with the surface, and a media frenzy began. But as we now know, the sound of the implosion was recorded when it happened. Footage was released in May 2025 that showed Wendy Rush, Stockton's wife, on the surface, reacting to a sound and not realizing that she'd just heard the instantaneous death of her husband. Elsewhere, and the U.S. Navy eventually announced that it had already detected the sound of a possible implosion from the wreckage of the Titanic, which director James Cameron has talked about in various interviews.
They were informed by naval intelligence that an implosion event was tracked to the coordinate of the Titanic wreck site.
He said he and his fellow submarines had contacts in the Navy and knew that an implosion had already happened days before the families and public were informed. 96 hours of air.
The mini-sub, called the Titan, vanished an hour and 45 minutes into its 4-kilometer plunge.
Despite the implosion being recorded and heard the moment it happened, an intense media circus ensued, with 24/7 coverage of the missing submarine.
The Titan carries 96 hours worth of oxygen, and a third of that is now gone. They may have as little as 60 hours before breathing becomes impossible.
There were constant reports counting down how many hours of air the sub had, waiting for its various fail-safes to kick in and hopefully for it to surface. This was derided after the fact as offering false hope to the families of the victims when the Navy knew the sub was already lost.
There's no other explanation for losing comms and tracking when they weren't yet at the bottom other than implosion.
The U.S. Coast Guard was still saying in press conferences that it was a rescue mission, but it took 4 days for officials to find the wreckage, after finally getting some remote submersibles that could search for the debris. 10 days after it disappeared, human remains were found. Banging sounds.
It seemed impossible, but just a few hours ago, signs of life from a sonar, which acts like a bionic ear underwater.
It wasn't just wishful thinking that kept people searching for Titan on the surface, though. There were also widespread reports of banging sounds, detected by sonobuoys dropped to listen for underwater noises. People were led to believe that the banging could indicate that the crew was alive and waiting to be rescued, again giving false hope to the families that they might be reunited with their loved ones.
Crews searching for the sub reportedly heard today banging sounds at 30-minute intervals.
The Coast Guard admitted that it didn't know what the banging sounds were, but others, including James Cameron again, theorized that it could have been noises from the ships in the area. It's also been suggested that it was the sound of the Titanic wreckage itself shifting and creaking at the bottom of the sea.
Right now, underwater drones are trying to confirm the source of that banging and to hopefully spot the missing sub.
The wreckage.
Debris was found right in that search area on the seafloor, just 1,600 feet away from the bow of the Titanic.
Though debris was found after a few days, no footage of the wreck was revealed until September 2024. The footage was released as part of the investigations, with separate clips showing the two sections of the sub on the ocean floor. This all proved exactly what we already knew, that it was the carbon fiber hull that failed. When another clip of the front of the Titan was released, the mangled carbon fiber was plain to see.
Seeing the debris, the pieces that were left over, kind of replaying what must have occurred.
A BBC documentary later showed some of the pieces of debris that were recovered and brought to the surface, including a pen thought to have been on Stockton Rush. They also recovered some stickers meant to celebrate the company and the dive to the Titanic.
Stockton would have understood the reality of an implosion being instantaneous and painless.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into settings and switch on your notifications. The hearings.
The Coast Guard has officially convened a Marine Board of Investigation led by Chief Investigator Captain Neubauer.
Throughout 2024, the Marine Board of Investigation held hearings to interview various witnesses and experts and determine how this had been allowed to happen. We heard chilling testimony, with people discussing how they expressed their concerns to Rush and were ignored, insulted, or in at least one case, fired from the company.
The term mission specialist was created by OceanGate to give the perception, to others and including regulators that these were really crew members, when in fact they were paying passengers.
We also heard that people tried to notify the authorities that illegal dives were happening in an unregulated vessel, including for-profit expeditions, and that nobody acted to stop Rush in an official capacity. And finally, we heard many experts explaining how they would never in a million years gotten into an experimental submersible that made these design choices.
OceanGate came very, very close to killing me and has had a severe impact on my business as well as an entire industry.
Let us know in the comments whether you think expeditions like this should be banned.
We took it underwater, and then there was just a cascade of problems with the sub.